There are no quiet rests in the Imperium of Man. There are only seizures, sudden, total, and absolute. The moment when the state remembers you exist. One heartbeat you are an invisible citizen among trillions. The next you are property again. The Adeptus Arbites don't knock. They declare. Their entry is an event, not an action. Sirens bloom through the hive's veins like infection. Doors unmake themselves beneath concussion charges. Walls collapse before warrants do. When they come for you, they come as if for a planet. The lex mechanics of the precinct fortress had identified the accused designation. Civitas Worker 47 Delta. Manufactorum subsection 12. Hive Lathes Prime. His crime was simple. The delay of production beyond acceptable quota margins during the 9th shift cycle in the Imperium. That is heresy enough. To fall short is to defy the Emperor's will. For every unfulfilled order ripples through the galaxy's supply arteries and starves the wars at its edge. The Arbites rive in their Carapace black armor, each bearing the sigil of the throne embossed across their chests like a confession. The vox grillis of their helmets are tuned to amplify nothing human. Their voices become pronouncements carved from stone. Behind them march the servitors, flesh reduced to compliance, grafted into frames of steel and obedience. One carries the data slate, another the chains. The rest begins with the recitation of your failures. By decree of the Lex Imperialis, under mandate of the High Lords of Terra, you are found in breach of Labor Edict 17.2, subsection Omicron. You stand accused of dereliction of duty, willful inefficiency, and potential heretical intent. The words are read with ritual precision, not belief. The Arbites do not investigate. They execute procedure. The guilt is not weighed but announced. To question the verdict is to confirm it. The man's hands tremble. He stares at the floor because the floor cannot damn him. The servitors move with a priest's patience, their chains clicking with liturgical rhythm. Every link bears the aquila. Each sound of metal on metal is a prayer for compliance. He tries to speak, to explain that the machinery had jammed, that his overseer had ignored his requests for repair, that he had not slept in 72 hours. But the Arbite's recorder is not listening for defense. It is listening for tone, for the modulation of treason. Even the pattern of breath can be logged as defiance. When they take him, they do not say where. There are no courts. There are only destinations for the ordinary citizen. That destination is the Adeptus Arbites precinct fortress, where confession is manufactured and guilt is rendered into data. For the unlucky, or the interesting, it is the Schola Interrogatorum, where inquisitorial oversight begins its slow, surgical poetry. But for most, it begins beneath the hive, the holding crypts, where light itself is rationed. The descent begins before transport. Prisoners are stripped not for humiliation, but for standardization. Uniforms are issued based on category of guilt, gray for the inefficient, black for the seditious, red for those whose crimes touch faith. Every garment is tagged with a small purity seal, a wax emblem with the words servitude is salvation. The irony is not recorded. As he is bound, he hears the distant hum of the Lex engine, a machine the size of a cathedral, where millions of names scroll past an endless petition. Somewhere in that machinery, a new line is inscribed with his "He has been noticed by the Imperium." That is not a blessing. The transport itself is a penitent hauler, a vessel built for movement, not mercy. Dozens are shackled together in chains that feed directly into the hauler's motive cortex. Every prisoner's heartbeat powers the machine's internal servos through neural converters, embedded in the manacles. The faster they panic, the faster it travels. The Arbites ride in silence above them. The only sound is the machine hymn of the hauler's engine and the mechanical litanies of its pilot. A blind servitor whose lips still move in the shape of prayers it can no longer understand. Hours pass, or days. Time fractures when light is denied. The man tries to recall the face of his overseer, the smell of machine oil and ozone that had once defined his life. He finds nothing. The Imperium erases not only bodies, but context. Identity is a luxury reserved for the loyal. When the hauler stops, the first sound is not the hiss of hydraulics, but the toll of a bell. One long, low note, the confession tone. It echoes through the chamber, resonating against the cages until bones vibrate in sympathy. The sound is meant to cleanse the soul by reminding it of its fragility. They are unloaded into a vast hall of metal and faith, the civic penitence ward. The ceiling rises into darkness. Its surface is lost behind iron rafters and hanging censer globes that drip incense into the air, until it burns the lungs. Rows of cages stretch to the horizon, each stacked 3 levels high. At the center stands a statue of the Emperor, 15 meters tall, eyes blindfolded by a ribbon of rusted chains. The prisoners are lined before the statue for initial declaration. An Arbite's judge, his armor gilded and his helmet etched with the litanies of sanction, recites the law again, not because anyone will hear it, but because the act itself maintains the illusion of process. Each prisoner is asked a single question: do you accept your guilt? Those who answer yes are logged, numbered, and reassigned to servitor conditioning. Those who answer no are logged, numbered, and reassigned to interrogation. The distinction exists only in theory. Both pots end beneath the Mechanicus scalpels, where flesh and faith are reconfigured for usefulness. The man hesitates. The judge watches with the stillness of a statue waiting to be believed in again. Silence is also an answer. Designation 47 Delta, non-compliant. Route to Division Primus. The guards drag him toward a corridor marked with the sigil of the Lex Mechanicum. The smell of ozone intensifies. The sound changes. It is no longer the rhythmic clang of boots but the wet, organic thrum of machinery that has absorbed too much human function. In the cells beyond, the prisoners hang in frames of steel that pulse faintly with blue light. Tubes feed into veins, drawing data as much as blood. The interrogators are not men. They are machines of the Mechanicus, their limbs jointed with bronze and their eyes replaced by lens arrays that hum with focusing light. They do not torture for confession. They harvest information as the Imperium harvests ore. The man is secured into the frame. A cold rod slides into the base of his skull. His vision erupts in static as the Lex Mechanicum links to his neural pathways. Through that connection, his memories are read not as story, but as logistics: his productivity rate, his hesitation before orders, his heartbeat during inspection, his time spent idle. Each moment is analyzed, categorized, and given worth. When the machine finishes, a binary verdict prints itself across the cogitator's parchment output. Result: inefficient material reclamation recommended. The interrogator stamps the page with a cog seal and moves to the next. The man is no longer a person, but a component marked for reassembly. He will not be executed. The Imperium does not waste raw material. He will be recycled, his organs purified for transference, his bones boiled for nutrient paste, his nervous system mapped into a servitor cortex. Death is never the end. Inefficiency is repurposed, and yet, sometimes, there are exceptions when the interrogators report anomalies, deviations of thought, fragments of knowledge that do not fit the profile. The data is sent to higher channels. There are places in the Imperium where curiosity is not immediately punished, but studied, dissected, understood. Division Primus serves as the filter for such anomalies. Those deemed potentially useful heretics are redirected to black site facilities, under the Inquisition's oversight. As he is disconnected from the Lex machine, the man collapses to the floor, his vision a whirl of burning after images. He can still feel the data slave's needle in his spine. The guards lift him without ceremony. Through a slit in the cell wall, he glimpses another prisoner, a woman in a scholar's robe, face obscured by a restrained halo. Her eyes move but see nothing. Between them, a servitor sweeps the floor, humming a fragment of the Litany of Duty. The words are slurred, broken, but still recognizable. To serve is to live. To live is to serve. He is led onward, past the engraving that marks the facility's exit. The Emperor knows all. The phrase is burned into the metal so deep that even the light refuses to leave it. The hauler awaits. The same chains, the same hum. But now he notices something new. Beneath the mechanical chant of the engine, there's another sound, softer, almost human. It's the murmur of thousands of voices echoing through the conduits of the hive. The confessions of those who came before, recorded by the machine and replayed eternally. The man tries to cover his ears. The chains do not allow it. The hauler moves. The destination changes. Far below Hivelade's prime, beneath kilometers of rockreet, lies Penal Station K-42, known unofficially as the Quiet Basilica. It is here that the Imperium's forgotten are stored. Not killed, not absolved, stored. The Administratum calls it pending reallocation. In truth, it is a vault for failures too minor to purge, too human to trust. As the hauler's clamps disengage, the man looks out through the narrow viewport in his cell. The sky above the hive is not black, but red, stained by the light of orbital furnaces that never sleep. He realizes he has never actually seen the stars. He wonders if the Emperor sees him now. He hopes he doesn't. When the hauler's ramp lowers, the air hits. There is no single moment when a human becomes a prisoner of the Imperium. It happens gradually, through paperwork, through catechism, through the ritual of being forgotten. processing begins where rest ends, in the long corridors of the quiet basilica, beneath the hives of 1,000 worlds. To the administratum, it is not a prison but an interim sorting facility. To those within it, it is purgatory without theology. Every prisoner, from the petty thief to the dissident preacher, passes through the same series of stations. Each station is a machine that believes it is merciful. The first is registration. Here, a procession of chained figures is herded through a hall so vast it needs its own weather system. Condensation drips from the ceiling like the tears of a god too bored to watch. The prisoners are stripped again, scanned, numbered, and marked. Not with ink. Ink fades. They are branded with ident glyphs carved into the flesh by mono needles. Heated with consecrated plasma, each glyph carries a code: planetary origin, category of offense, recommended labor type, and level of repentance. It is said the Lex custodians can read a life story at a glance, simply by tracing the glyphs with their gloved hands. Do not think of this as punishment. One custodian tells a new rival, think of it as inventory. Above them, massive servo-cherubs drift like mechanical seraphs, their wings stitched with parchment prayers. Each cherub carries a stylus in one hand and a blood collection tube in the other. They document as they drain. The Imperium keeps no secrets from itself. Every drop is logged, every DNA strand cross-referenced against a billion other records. The next stage is evaluation. Each prisoner kneels before a vox priest, a cyborg whose voice is spliced with the tone of the Lex Mechanicus, speaking in alternating fragments of High Gothic and binary. His face is a lattice of augmetic implants. His eyes are cameras, his tongue a speaker grill. He asks questions, though none have correct answers. Do you love the Emperor? Do you regret your inefficiency? Would you give your body to his service? Every answer is analyzed by the emotion engine, a cogitator that interprets microtremors in voice and heartbeat. Falsehood is measured, faith is graphed. It does not matter what one says, only what one feels. And in the Imperium, feeling the wrong thing is treason. Those whose readings show sufficient compliance are marked for reassignment. Those who resist are logged for further refinement. In truth, both groups go to the same place, only by different doors. The man once known as 47 Delta, now subject 3B1472 Omicron, kneels before his vox priest. His body is weak from confinement. The catechism burns behind his eyes like a parasite that refuses to die. The priest asks, "Do you understand your place in the Emperor's design?" He nods. "To serve." The machine hums. Data flickers across the lenses. Compliance acceptable. Fear threshold moderate. Repurpose efficiency 82%. A mechanical stamp brands a purity seal to his chest. A wax emblem pressed into flesh that reads salvation through labor. The blood that seeps beneath it is left uncleaned. The Imperium likes its symbols visible. Next comes allocation. The basilica's lower vaults are divided into wings, each governed by a different institution. The Adeptus Mechanicus claims the bodies with strong limbs and docile minds, raw material for servitor production. The Astra Militarum requisitions the violent and the desperate for penal legions. The ecclesiarchy takes the broken ones, those who can still weep, and molds them into flagellants, living sermons of pain. Allocation is conducted by Logister servitors, entities more machine than priest. They do not speak, they only measure. Their eyes project data sigils onto the prisoners, calculating worth in muscle, endurance, and faith retention. When the metrics are complete, a mechanical hand points to the appropriate gate. The gates are identical, tall, steel, featureless, but each leads to a different kind of death. Our man is sent to Gatex, the servitor foundries. It is a descent, always a descent. The floors grow hotter, the air more chemical, until every breath tastes like burnt iron. The foundries lie beneath the basilica's foundations, closer to the magma veins that power the hive's furnaces. Here, the Emperor's mercy becomes industrial. They are stripped once again, their chains replaced by neural leashes that connect directly to cranial ports. Rows of them march in unison toward a platform surrounded by surgical arms, chanting servitors, and the deep, droning hymn of the machine cant. The smell is antiseptic and sweet, the odor of flesh meeting oil. A Magos overseeing the line lifts his mechadendrite staff. The flesh is weak, he intones. The flesh is wasteful, but the flesh can serve. On cue, the procedure begins. Each prisoner is laid on a slab. Restraints tighten with the hiss of pneumatic faith. A cold metal arch descends, filled with needles and spinning cogitator probes. They don't anesthetize. Sensation is part of the purification. Screams are cataloged as calibration data. They remove the unnecessary. The eyes that once judged, the tongue that once questioned, the genitals that once desired. They insert instead obedience, precision, purpose, servo implants, cranial jacks, saptic limiters. By the end, what lies on the slab is not man or machine, but an equation, a perfect ratio of flesh to function. The transformation takes hours, days, or seconds, depending on the observer's humanity. When it's complete, the servitor's eyes glow faint amber, a newborn dawn of subservience. Its voice speaks the simplest prayer, command received, for those unchosen by the Mechanicus. There are other forms of processing. The penal legions of the Astra Militarum recruit from the Basilica's overflow. In theory, they offer redemption through service. In practice, they are a way to weaponize guilt. Each recruit is fitted with a control collar, a band of metal engraved with a miniature explosive charge keyed to their heartbeat. The collars are linked to the Overseer's Vox code. One wrong word, one hesitation in battle, and the code detonates. The result is immediate repentance. A commissar visiting the Basilica once described it as faith made efficient. The penal legionnaires are shipped to the frontiers, two worlds where survival is measured in minutes. They march under banners of gray cloth and rusted scripture. No one remembers their names. Their death reports list them as expended assets. Those the ecclesiarchy claims fare no better. They are led to the chambers of contrition, where the air smells of sweat, salt, and old incense. Here, repentance is not coded into flesh by Mechanicus blades, but carved by their own hands. Flagellants are taught that pain is purification. Chains become their rosaries, scars their scripture. They wander from hive to hive, their mouths sewn shut with iron wire, their eyes blindfolded, their backs striped with lashes that glisten with blood and wax. When they chant, it is through the holes left in their cheeks, voices hissing like steam through a broken valve. The crowds watch and weep. They do not weep for the suffering, they weep for how beautifully ordered it is. Back in the Basilica, the processing continues. Every corridor hums with the rhythm of paperwork and pain. The administratum clerks, pale and sleepless, stamp the endless data slates that record each processed soul. They sit at desks stacked to the ceiling with forms, each form identical, each signature blessed by rote. To them, the prisoners are not human but statistics feeding the grand machinery of compliance. The Basilica's overseer, a judge named Vorntaub, reviews the ledgers from his observation pulpit. He has never seen the surface. He was born in this place, educated by the Arbite's creed, fed by ration and devotion. His faith is not zeal but inertia. It continues because stopping would require belief. He looks down through the reinforced glass into the processing halls. Thousands move below, their chants blending with the grind of gears. To him, it is the sound of civilization. But sometimes, even in the Imperium, the machine falters. A disturbance is reported from Gatex, a servitor unit, newly processed, has ceased function. Its systems continue, but its body refuses to move. The Magos declares it an anomaly. The servitor's heart still beats, though its control implants respond to no command. When they open its skull, they find the neural chip has fused with the organic tissue in a pattern resembling the aquila. Coincidence, the Magos insists. The Emperor's hand whispers another. The Magos orders it scrapped. The whispers persist. Such anomalies are not rare. The Imperium breeds billions of miracles and heresies daily, and cannot tell the difference. The data of this particular event is archived under deviation, faith residual, no further inquiry. By the end of the cycle, the Basilica's quota is fulfilled. 10,000 processed, 8,000 servitors, 1,500 for the legions, 500 for the ecclesiarchy, 100 miscellaneous transfers, those whose profiles do not fit any template, shipped off-world to destinations redacted even from the overseer's eyes. The transports depart one by one, ascending through the hive smog toward orbit. From above, they look like sparks rising from a dying fire. Inside the Basilica, silence returns. The machines rest. The prisoners who remain breathe the recycled air of the forgotten dot in one of the lower corridors. 47 Delta, or what remains of him, sits on a bench beside the operating chamber. He is alive, but no longer entirely human. Small cables thread from his neck to a console. His right arm is steel. His left eye glows faintly red. He no longer feels fear, or hunger, or hope, only the static hum of obedience. The Imperium does not bury its prisoners. It exports them. There is no end to punishment, only relocation. When the quiet Basilica reaches its capacity, the machine of bureaucracy exhales. Bells toll 3 times. Vox announcers chant departure hymns. And from the underbelly of the hive, black hulled carriers rise on columns of exhaust, dragging the condemned toward the stars. To the administratum, this is logistics. To the prisoners, it is ascension into the unknown. The ships are called penitent barges, though there is nothing penitent about them. They are relics from forgotten wars, kilometers of rusted hull, patched with prayers and welding scars. The Mechanicus calls them efficient reclamation assets. The ecclesiarchy calls them mobile shrines of redemption. The men who ride them call them what they are, coffins with engines. Each barge is a floating cathedral of suffering. Rows of hab cells line its inner hull like organs stitched into a wound. Every compartment is numbered, catalogued, sealed. The air inside is recycled through incense filters to mask the smell of confinement. The ceilings drip with holy water mixed with condensation. Candles burn behind iron gratings, fed by Promethean pipes disguised as altars. Even faith is mechanical here. Before departure, each prisoner receives a final blessing, a ritual the Arbites call the benediction of function. They kneel in the embarkation hall while priests in ash-stained robes anoint their heads with machine oil. The priests speak not comfort, but compliance. You are not abandoned. You are redirected. Then the locks engage. The boarding process takes hours. Chains clink like an orchestra of restraint. Each group is filed into narrow corridors lit by flickering lumen globes. At the end waits a scribe servitor with a quill grafted into its wrist. Its voice a rasp of static. Confirm designation, confirm guilt, confirm faith. Failure to respond is counted as affirmation. No one leaves unconfirmed. When the last signature is scratched into parchment, the ramp seals, and the barge's engines awaken. They roar like a congregation in agony. The vibration passes through metal, bone, and thought. The ship becomes a single, colossal heartbeat, the pulse of a civilization that eats its own to keep moving. The stars vanish as the vessel dives into the warp. The warp travel of a penitent barge is not like that of a navy vessel or merchant ship. There are no Geller fields here that burn brightly with the Emperor's grace. The fields exist, but they flicker, underpowered, ancient, unreliable. They protect enough to ensure cargo survival, but not sanity, for the duration of the voyage. Every prisoner hears things they will never speak of. The warp does not whisper to them as it does to psychers. It breathes on them. It tastes their regret, their fear, their prayers, and feeds it back as echoes. A recorded account recovered from penal ship St. Haldron's Mercy describes it best. We saw our own reflections in the walls. They moved when we didn't. Some said it was the warp. Some said it was guilt. I say it was the Emperor showing us what we were. Every night cycle. The chaplains walk the corridors swinging censers heavy with ash, chanting hymns to drown the noise. Some prisoners join in. Others only mouth the words. It doesn't matter. The ship's vox amplifies the hymns until the hull itself seems to pray. Sleep is impossible. The lights never fully dim. The chains never stop vibrating. And somewhere in the labyrinth of the ship, a mechanical choir sings without lungs. 1,000 recorded voices repeating one line. Redemption is service. Service is life. The transports are divided by destination. Those marked for the Astra Militarum penal legions are confined near the aft sections, closest to the ammunition holds. Their collars glow faint blue, synchronized to the commissariat's central command deck. Periodically, the collars discharge, a low hum that rattles teeth and reminds everyone of ownership. At the center of the ship, the Mechanicus compartments house those destined to become servitors or test subjects. These cells are cold, near absolute zero, to slow metabolic decay. Within, the prisoners lie in suspended paralysis, frozen, yet conscious, their minds trapped in the gap between flesh and function. The forward decks belong to the ecclesiarchy pilgrims, the penitents and flagellants who have been deemed too holy for death, but too dangerous for freedom. Their compartments are lined with shrines carved from the bones of former occupants. Every hour, they are ordered to pray aloud, their voices broadcast through the entire ship as inspirational material. The noise is ceaseless. In the command sanctum sits the ship's captain, Lord Marshal Keterin Holt of the Adeptus Arbites. His armor is ceremonial, his eyes replaced with augmetic lenses capable of reading confession directly from a pulse. Around him, the bridge crew chant the litany of destination. By his will, we deliver the unworthy to their next function. Keterin has overseen 33 such voyages. He has never seen a prisoner return. 3 days into warp transit, the first casualty occurs. A prisoner in the aft cell stops breathing, not from injury, but from revelation. The Medicae log records no cause. The Vox log, however, records his final words. He's watching from the dark, The death triggers a purification cycle. The body is removed, sealed, and ejected into the ship's plasma vent. Its combustion is declared an offering. The chaplains deliver a sermon over the sound of ignition. They remind the survivors that the Emperor accepts all fuel, even the faithless. As the journey continues, the mechanical choir shifts tone. The voices distort. The hymns change key. Some swear the choir begins whispering individual names. The warp is listening. The warp never forgets. The priests double the incense. The air becomes thick enough to drink. The prisoners breathe devotion or suffocate trying mid-voyage. A second event occurs. A servitor collapses in the Mechanicus deck, spasming as data floods from its implants. The runes on its chest flare with binary fire. Tech priests rush to contain it. From its mouth pours a stream of static that forms into coherent words, not machine code, not human speech, but something between. Too many prayers, it says. The machine dreams of drowning. Then it dies. The Magos overseeing the deck orders silence, then dictates a single note for the voyage log. Faith interference event. Containment successful. Causality unverified. No one mentions it again. By the 7th day, the warp shifts. The Geller field wavers for precisely 11 seconds, a brief flicker, unnoticed by the bridge, but unforgettable to those below. The lights twist into shapes. The air smells like blood and ozone. Chains tighten of their own accord. Some prisoners begin screaming hymns. Others gnaw their tongues until they bleed, hoping the pain will drown the whispers. When the field stabilizes, half the ship's lumen globes explode. In the darkness that follows, someone begins to laugh. The sound spreads cell to cell, a contagion of hysteria, rolling like a tide. The Arbites open the vents and flood the lower decks with purity gas, a mix of oxygen, soporifics, and synthetic incense. The laughter stops. The silence returns. The official log notes minor morale deviation. Hours stretch into rotations. The warp voyage feels endless, but time still obeys bureaucracy. Each cycle, the priests perform inspection rites. They walk through the rows, accompanied by a servitor carrying the scroll of redemption, a parchment that unrolls for kilometers, bearing the names of all those saved through service. When the priest stops, he selects a name at random and reads it aloud. The chosen prisoner must respond, "I am that name." It doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is obedience. Identity is a privilege of the free. The condemned are interchangeable. The man, who was once 47 Delta, says the words automatically. His voice is monotone, stripped of memory. The collar at his neck vibrates with approval. The priest smiles beneath his respirator mask. Good. The Emperor has room for all who forget themselves. The penitent barge's destination is a planet known only by its registry code, Ashuarix. A world of dust and factories orbiting a dying star. Officially, it is a penal labor site dedicated to imperial reclamation. Unofficially, it is a graveyard that never stops eating. The planet is wrapped in a permanent dusk. Its atmosphere is thick with carbon ash. Its surface dotted with manufacturing towers that rise like tombstones. Rivers of slag cut through plains of rust. The sky glows faint red, not from sunset, but from the reflection of burning metal. It is said that Ashuarix was once a mining world, then a forge world, then a prison world, and finally all three at once. Its overseers have long since stopped keeping count of the souls sent there. As the barge approaches orbit, the Vox fills with mechanical liturgies. Prepare descent. Rejoice in reformation. All service is sanctified. The prisoners are awakened from stupor by electric pulses. Chains tighten. Doors unlock. The air grows hot with ozone and fear. They are herded into shuttles, smaller coffins within the greater coffin, each one packed with 100 bodies. The shuttles detach, falling through clouds of black dust that crackle with static. From below, the surface looks alive. The glow of furnaces paints the landscape in molten veins. Each vein leads to a factory complex the size of a city, surrounded by barbed walls and chimneys that reach higher than cathedrals. The shuttles land with the grace of artillery shells. The ramps slam open. Overseers in respirator masks wait with shock malls and Auspex tablets. The first order is always the same. Crawl, and so they crawl, out of the ships, into the ash, under the watchful eyes of those who used to be them. The process. Ashuar 9 does not sleep. It hums. Every hour, the planet vibrates with the rhythm of production. The wind carries the sound of machinery across plains of ash, a constant thunder that replaces thought. The sky is a sheet of iron-red cloud, illuminated by furnace light and orbital fires. It never rains. It only falls dust, gray, hot, bitter, For the prisoners, this is paradise compared to what came before. At least here, you can still feel your heartbeat. 47 Delta wakes in his barracks to the sound of the shift horns. They echo through the metal walls, vibrating the ribs of everyone who still has flesh enough to feel it. He no longer counts the days. There are no dawns, only rotations. Each begins the same. The siren, the stampede, the march to labor. The barracks are long, low corridors built from the recycled hulls of crashed ships. The walls are etched with devotional graffiti, crude aquila scratched with nails, prayers written in blood, names that no one remembers how to pronounce. The floor is dirt mixed with ash, forming a paste that sticks to everything. The air tastes of metal filings and sweat. They line up in ranks. The overseers walk the rows, flanked by servo skulls carrying auspex lanterns. Each prisoner is scanned for vitals and faith signatures. Those whose pulse or prayer output drops below tolerance are reassigned. No one knows where reassignment leads. The rumor is that the reassigned return later, silent and mechanical, faces smooth as wax. 47 Delta stands motionless while the servo skull hovers before him. It emits a tone, records his breath, then chirps approval. The overseer moves on. He exhales. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. Work begins at the slag pits. Each pit is a crater the size of a city block, filled with molten runoff from the manufactorums above. Chains of prisoners shovel cooled slag into conveyor belts that feed the smelters. The heat is unbearable. The ground burns through the soles of their boots. The air shimmers like a mirage, turning bodies into ghosts. Above, cranes move like metal gods, lowering containers of scrap and lifting cages of corpses. The corpses are not disposed of. They are fed back into the furnaces. Nothing is wasted on Ashuari X-47 Delta's task is to clear blockage from one of the slag chutes. He uses a shovel forged from the thigh bone of another prisoner, reinforced with steel. Every few minutes, an overseer passes by, swinging a shock-maul lazuli. Its crackle a reminder of consequence. He works without pause. There is no rest cycle, only rotation changes. When one group collapses, another takes its place. The heat makes the horizon waver. Sometimes, he thinks he sees faces in the molten flow, not illusions, but memory. The Lex Mechanicum still hums in his skull, faint as an afterimage. He wonders if the machine that read his thoughts still stores them somewhere, filed away like inventory. He whispers a prayer, not for salvation, but for purpose. In the Imperium, the two are the same. At midday, though midday means nothing here, the work sirens sound again. The prisoners drop their tools and kneel. From loudspeakers mounted on the cranes, the litany of gratitude blares across the pits. Your labor sustains his wars. Your pain is the proof of his mercy. The overseers walk through the kneeling ranks, sprinkling them with machine oil and recycled water. The liquid burns on the skin, a ritual sterilization. Those who flinch are struck. Those who don't are blessed. For 7-Delta keeps his head bowed. The overseer's shadow passes over him like an eclipse. He does not move until the horns sound again. Work resumes. Beyond the slag pits lies the foundry district, where the condemned are turned into tools. Huge manufactorums rise from the plain like fortresses, their walls covered in reliefs of the emperor holding scales and sword. Inside, the air is thick with smog and machine hymns. The foundries are run by Techmagos Breventhal, a creature half human, half furnace. His torso is plated in bronze, his limbs replaced with servo arms tipped with surgical claws. His voice crackles through Vox speakers embedded in every wall. The Emperor rewards efficiency. The inefficient are fuel. Under his command, thousands of prisoners labor at the assembly lines. They forge components for weapons, armor plating, and servitor frames. Each worker is assigned a quota displayed on a small lumen board above their station. Failure to meet the number results in punishment. Surpassing it results in reassignment. The paradox is intentional. The Imperium understands that hope is more dangerous than despair. 47 Delta's quota is for 100 slag-shaped ingots per rotation. He stops counting after 200. His muscles move automatically, guided by rhythm, not will. The clang of hammer on mold becomes his heartbeat. Across from him works a woman, thin, hairless, her eyes milky from radiation burns. Her ident glyph reads 53 Theta. She never speaks, but sometimes their shovels strike in unison, forming a wordless communion. In the Imperium, silence is the closest thing to kindness. When her arm slips and she spills molten metal onto the floor, the overseer arrives instantly. The punishment is precise. A shock maul pressed to the spine, a scream, the smell of burnt ozone and flesh. Then she is gone. dragged away by servo arms into the recycling chute. No one looks up, looking as participation. For 7-Delta keeps working. The night cycles bring no darkness, only dimmer light. The manufactorums run perpetually, powered by reactors that drink promethium and hope. In the distance, the planetary rail lines hum as trains carry processed goods to the orbital elevators. Each shipment represents 1,000 lives consumed and accounted for. Sometimes, the prisoners hear explosions echoing from beyond the horizon, the sound of rebellions crushed before they can begin. It is said that on Ashuarix, every uprising ends the same way. The rebels' bodies melted down and poured into the molds of the very weapons they tried to seize. One cycle, while hauling slag carts toward the furnaces, 47 Delta notices a change. The air feels heavier. The sound of machinery falters. Overseers exchange glances. Then, the Vox speakers crackle. Emergency directive. Quota acceleration order issued by Segmentum Command. All labor doubled. Failure is heresy. No explanation, no pause. The rhythm doubles. The prisoners push harder. The machines groan. Some collapse. The overseers don't bother with shock malls anymore. They simply record names for reclamation. 47 Delta's vision blurs. His shovel slips. A splash of molten slag burns through his boot, searing flesh to bone. He stifles the scream. To cry out is to be noticed. To be noticed is to disappear. He keeps working. Hours or days later, he collapses beside his workstation. The overseer marks his number on a tablet and walks away. Two servitors arrive, lift his body, and carry him to the mediatorium, where the line between healing and harvesting is erased. The mediatorium is a cathedral of silence. Rows of surgical tables line the chamber like pews. Above each table hang servo arms tipped with blades, injectors, and saws. The smell of disinfectant is sharp enough to taste. A Medicae servitor approaches, its face smooth metal, its voice a single word looped endlessly. Repurpose. 47 Delta's wound is cleaned with promethium solvent. The pain is indescribable, yet strangely distant. A section of his leg is removed and replaced with a steel brace. The metal fuses to bone with a hiss. The servitor applies a purity seal to the wound, whispering the creed. The Emperor mends those who can still function. He is returned to the slag pits the next rotation. His leg clanks with every step. The overseer nods approval. Efficiency restored. Weeks pass, or perhaps months. Time dissolves in repetition. The prisoners no longer speak in words but in gestures, nods, looks, rhythms. The overseers do not notice, or they do, and simply allow it. Even oppression needs a language. One day, while transferring slag carts, 47 Delta hears a whisper through the Vox network. Not a broadcast, something leaking between channels. A human voice, faint and trembling. They're leaving. They're leaving the northern foundries. Rumors of rebellion always circulate. They never end well, but this one spreads faster than most. By the next rotation, the overseers double patrols. The priests walk the lines reciting the litany of loyalty. There is no freedom but in obedience. There is no peace but in submission. 47 Delta says nothing, but that night, he sees something impossible. Far beyond the slag plains, beyond the furnaces and rail lines, a light burns in the darkness, not red or orange, but white, pure, cold, the color of stars. He stares until it fades. When he mentions it quietly to 53 Theta the next day, she nods once. The North, she says, voice barely a breath. Maybe it's real. They say no more. The walls have ears, and some of them are alive. 2 rotations later, the northern foundries go dark. No work sirens, no lights, no hymns. The smoke that usually rises from that direction turns pale, then vanishes. The overseers call it a power failure. The priests call it a test of faith. The prisoners call it hope. That night, the planetary Vox relays are filled with static. The Emperor's litanies cut in and out. The overseer's commands lag. For the first time in years, silence spreads across the pits. 47 Delta lifts his head and looks at the sky. The ash clouds glow faintly from orbital light. For a moment, he imagines he can see the stars, not through faith, but through absence. He feels something stir inside him. Something not entirely human yet not machine. A pulse that doesn't belong to obedience. A memory of choice. He grips his shovel tighter. Around him, others pause as well. -53 Theta. The old preacher missing half his jaw. The boy who hums hymns without words. Something unspoken passes through them all. The overseer shouts. The northern horizon no longer glows red. Where the furnaces once breathed, There is only haze, a pale wound cut into the sky. The slag winds have stopped blowing from that direction. Even the overseers avoid looking toward it. Weeks have passed since the rebellion that never officially happened. The Vox announcers call it a reactor malfunction. The ecclesiarchy preachers call it divine calibration. The administratum records call it nothing at all. But among the laborers, the silence has a name. They call it the white light. The story travels faster than sound through the barracks tunnels. It changes with every retelling, as all forbidden hope does. Some say the white light was the emperor himself descending through the clouds to free the faithful. Others say it was a weapon, a heretic device stolen from the Mechanicus vaults and turned against the masters. Some whisper it wasn't light at all, but a hole in reality, a place where the warp itself turned its face away in disgust. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here, and that alone makes it sacred. 47 Delta hears the rumors while shoveling slag beside the furnaces. The rhythm of work hides the rhythm of speech. Every clang of metal masks a word, every hiss of steam a phrase. The overseers hear only noise, but within the noise, meaning grows. North burned clean. They saw stars through the clouds. Someone walked out alive. He doesn't believe it. He wants to. The slag pits never cool. Yet the ground feels colder now. It's as though the planet itself is holding its breath. Even the servitors hesitate between commands, pausing mid-motion as if listening. The Magos overseeing production blames electrical interference. The priests call for longer hymns. And still, the silence spreads. At the evening shift bell, 47 Delta returns to the barracks. The ash storms outside wail against the hull, painting the walls in streaks of gray. Inside, the prisoners huddle close around the lumen brazier, pretending its dying light is warmth. 53 Theta sits across from him, her face half lit, half scar. Her milky eyes catch the faint glow like two pieces of glass. She hasn't spoken since the rebellion, until now. They can't seal the tunnels, she whispers. He blinks. What tunnels? Under the slag pits. The old extraction lines. They run north. Her voice trembles, not from fear, but memory. They say you can still see it, the light. It shines under the ground now. A dozen faces lean closer. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else laughs, a dry, hopeless sound. But no one leaves. That night, the prisoners dream. They dream not of pain or work or punishment, but of walking through darkness and finding something that does not hurt. 2 rotations later, the priests arrive. They come in a procession of flame and iron, 30 of them, robed in crimson, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like skulls. Each carries a censer heavy with burning oil. The air fills with choking perfume. The lead priest steps onto the work platform and raises his staff, the aquila etched into its head. His vox-amplified voice shakes the air. Children of the Emperor, you have let impurity fester in your hearts. False light leads only to ruin. There was no miracle in the north. There was only error. The righteous do not seek signs. They become them. He gestures to the slag furnaces behind him. Kneel, and be cleansed by function. Thousands obey. Thousands always do. But kneeling feels different now. The ground no longer burns the same. The echo of that pale horizon lingers in every boat head. When the priests finish the sermon, they demand a sacrifice. Bring forth the ringleader of these heresies. No one moves. Then an overseer drags forward a man, old, thin, his body a map of scars. The others know him as the preacher, a half-mad flagellant who used to shout prayers at the furnaces. He smiles as they throw him before the priests. The light was real, he says. It burned the chains. They execute him on the spot. A bolt round through the chest. The crowd does not flinch. They watch the body fall. Watch the priests bless the corpse. Watch the ashes scatter into the furnace vents. And in silence, they record the moment. Fear has lost its precision. That night, the barracks whisper like a living thing. The tale changes again. Now the preacher walks in the north, reborn in the light. Now the priests killed him too late. Now his spirit moves through the ash, looking for others who still remember. 47 Delta listens, saying nothing. He lies awake on the steel floor, staring at the ceiling where rust has eaten the shape of an aquila. The lines blur into something else, wings breaking apart. He remembers the silence before the uprising. He remembers the trembling of the overseer's hand. He wonders if the Emperor sees rebellion as sin, or as survival. The next cycle brings inspection. Magos Thal himself descends into the slag pits, surrounded by a choir of servo-skulls and logic priests. His body glows with internal light, half machinery, half divinity. He moves through the ranks. scanning each worker with lenses that pierce skin and thought alike. When he stops before 47 Delta, the air crackles. The Magos voice is cold music. You have seen something. 47 Delta stares at the ground. Only smoke. Honored Magos, untrue. Neural pattern deviation detected. 17% above compliance median. A mechadendrite coils round his throat, metal fingers brushing his pulse. You think the light was salvation. It was entropy. You will unlearn it. The grip tightens until stars bloom behind his eyes. Then the Magos releases him. Return to function. 47 Delta collapses to his knees, coughing. The Magos moves on, recording data into his Vox implant. But for the first time, 47 Delta does not feel smaller after punishment. He feels confirmed. If the Mechanicus fears his thoughts, then his thoughts matter. By the next rotation, the Magos paranoia infects the overseers. They double the labor quotas again. They confiscate personal relics. They seal the tunnels rumored to lead north. But rumor has 1,000 mouths. The workers carve messages into the slag itself, into walls, into skin. Small symbols, a circle of light, a line beneath, the mark of the white light. It spreads faster than inspection can erase. Soon, even the servitors begin to echo it, muttering the words in broken binary. LIGHT. The Magos orders dozens disassembled for data contamination. Still it spreads. 47 Delta is transferred to the outer refineries, closer to the northern zone. The air here tastes of metal rain. Towers rise like the ribs of a dead giant. The ash falls thicker. But at night, the sky flickers, faint white flashes beyond the smog, as if the stars are trying to return. He meets others who claim to have seen it. A miner missing half his face, a child no older than 15, sentenced for theft of rations. They speak in fragments. It calls us, down there, to the broken rails. He doesn't believe, not yet, but he follows. When they slip away during rest cycle, crawling through exhaust tunnels that lead beneath the furnaces. The tunnels are older than memory. The walls are black glass, melted by ancient heat. Their footsteps echo like ghosts walking on bone. For hours they move in silence, guided only by instinct and faint tremors underfoot. Then, suddenly, the air changes. The heat fades, the dust thins, and ahead, in the darkness, a glow. White, cold, alive. They stop breathing. The chamber they find is vast, carved from the bedrock of the planet. In its center stands a sphere of pure light, hovering above a pool of mercury. Around it are machines, Mechanicus relics fused with unknown technology, half melted, half growing. The air vibrates like the surface of water. The child steps forward. It's beautiful. She whispers. For 7 Delta feels his implants hum, responding. The circuits under his skin heat until they ache. The light is not blinding, it's clarifying. For the first time, he sees his hands not as tools but as evidence, proof that flesh still exists beneath. Obedience. He takes another step. The others follow. Voices fill the air, not words, but emotion rendered audible. Regret, sorrow, defiance. It isn't the Emperor's voice. It isn't the warp's either. It's human. The echo of every prisoner who ever died. Here, fused into the stone, crying out not for salvation, but for acknowledgement. The white light is memory. It is everything the Imperium tried to erase. When they return to the surface, they carry the glow in their eyes. They don't speak of what they saw, but they no longer bow during the litany of gratitude. The overseers notice. Punishments increase. The Magos sends patrols into the tunnels. They find nothing. The light hides itself. The executions begin. Dozens are marched into the furnaces as examples. The priests shout that the Emperor demands obedience, that defiance breeds damnation. But even as they burn, the condemned do not scream. They stare north, eyes reflecting pale white. Rumor becomes creed. Creed becomes infection. Within a month, half the labor camps whisper the prayer of the white light before shift. We remember. We are not gone. The Magos demands orbital sanction. The Arbites refuse. Production must continue. The Ecclesiarchy dispatches new confessors to stamp out the heresy. Confessor Marion Cars arrives aboard a black shuttle, his armor adorned with parchment sigils, his eyes bright with fanatic certainty. He surveys the camps and sees blasphemy in every face. This is no faith, he declares. This is contagion. He orders every worker branded with purity seals bearing the words ignorance is redemption. 47 Delta receives his on the same chest where his servitor tag once burned. The wax cools against his skin like ice. He feels nothing. That night, he dreams of the white light whispering from beneath the planet, calling his number back from the ledgers. The white light lasted only a moment. But a moment is enough to fracture eternity. When the glow faded, Ashuarix did not explode or vanish. It stopped. Every furnace guttered. Every servo engine froze mid-motion. The air hung in chemical stillness, a silence so complete that even the ash refused to fall. Then the Vox line screamed across the system. Ships heard it, a single pulse of static shaped like a heartbeat. A strophet split from the eyes. Servitors twitched and recited half-remembered prayers. For 93 seconds, the machine spirit of every transmitter in orbit spoke one phrase in identical cadence. The forgotten are awake. Then it went quiet. 40-7 hours later, the first Imperial response arrived. The cruiser Aegis Provident descended through the ash clouds trailing banners of gold flame. Its hull bore the sigils of both the Adeptus Arbites and the Ordo Hereticus. On its bridge stood Inquisitor Maras Vex, a woman carved from will and scar tissue, wrapped in the black robes of the Emperor's judges. Her eyes one human. One augmetic surveyed the dead furnaces below. No movement. No transmissions. Production index at 0, the Vox officer reported. A contagion of faith, Vex murmured. Burn it. The order went out like scripture. They called the Operation Sanction Solaris. From orbit, Lance batteries traced thin white lines through the clouds, sterilizing the northern foundries first. The impacts blossomed in silence, ash billowing upward like black incense. The Aegis Providence Mechanicus detachment blessed every detonation as purification. But Ashuarix did not burn as easily as expected. Whole regions simply refused to ignite. Promethium bombs fizzled. Plasma strikes dispersed into harmless light. The planet behaved like stone remembering rain. Atmospheric anomaly. The tech priests insisted. Residual warp interference. Vex disagreed. It remembers what we did here. She ordered groundfall. The Arbites landers touched down near the slag plains once known as Section 12. Their boots sank into dust still warm from orbital fire. The air reeked of ozone and faith gone sour. They found thousands of bodies. No wounds, no burns, just stillness. Each corpse lay facing north, eyes open, mouths frozen mid-whisper. In their palms were symbols drawn in ash, a circle of light beneath a line. The mark of the white light, among them. 47 Delta lived, if living was the word. He awoke beneath a sky that no longer moved. The ash had fallen into perfect silence, layering the ground like snow. His ears rang with the echo of the light, soft, endless, human. He rose, metal leg grinding, and looked around. The barracks were gone. The towers were shells. Yet the bodies around him looked peaceful, as if released. He tried to remember the moment it happened, the flare, the warmth, the feeling that for one breath he had been more than function. Then it slipped away, replaced by static. He wandered north. He did not know why, only that something waited there. In the ruins of the outer refineries. The Arbites found him, a lone figure trudging through the ash, half machine, half man. Purity seal melted from his chest. When they encircled him, he did not resist. Designation? One barked. He blinked. I was 47 Delta. Crime? I remember. This stunned him anyway. Inquisitor Vex watched as they dragged the prisoner into the mobile judicium. A fortress temple dropped from orbit. Its interior smelled of wax and circuitry. At the center waited the interrogation cradle, a throne of steel tendrils and light. Vex studied the man. This one lived through the flare? Yes, Inquisitor, said the Magos. Biometrics stable. Neural interference high. Possible psychic contamination. Or miracle, Vex replied. Connect him. The Magos hesitated. The creed forbids. The creed broke when the planet did. Proceed. Needles slid into 47 Delta's spine. The cradle came alive, projecting his thoughts as light across the chamber wall. Flashes of slag, faces, and the blinding white pulse. Data streamed in holy binary. Vex stepped closer. Tell me what you saw. He struggled to speak. Words were relics here. Not the Emperor. Not chaos. Us. Explain. The light it was. Memoried everything we lost. Every voice that ever begged to be heard. The Magos muttered. Blasphemy. Vex silenced him with a glance. Continue. It asked nothing. It only remembered. The chamber lights flickered. The cogitators spat static. Somewhere deep within the fortress, a Voxquire began reciting Litany 512, a default failsafe against psychic resonance. Vex whispered, almost to herself, and did it judge you? 47 Delta shook his head. No, it forgave itself. That night, Vex recorded her findings in a sealed log. Subject displays no warp signature, yet exposure to anomaly induces latent empathy across machine-flesh interface. Theory: the light is an echo of human will unfiltered by creed faith stripped of bureaucracy. Dangerous. possibly divine. She did not transmit the report. A days turned to interrogations. Interrogations to experiments. The mechanicus dissected corpses and found no cause of death. Organs intact, blood uncoagulated, heart stopped as if commanded. When they opened skulls, they found faint bioluminescence woven through neural tissue. The glow resembled the symbol of the aquila fractured along one wing. The ecclesiarchy declared it heresy. The emperor's image cannot err, said Confessor Kars. This is mutation. Vex stared at the shining nerves in her palm. Or revelation. Meanwhile, the planet continued to resist control. Servitors reactivated without orders, forming processions through the ruins, chanting the same phrase, "We remember, we are not gone." Arbites patrols destroyed them, but each morning more appeared, assembled from scrap and bone. The mechanicus called it spontaneous self-assembly. Vex called it witness. One evening, as ash storms raged outside, she returned to 47 Delta cell. He sat chained, eyes dim but aware. "Do you still see it?" she asked. "Always." "What is it now?" "Waiting. For what?" "For you." The words struck harder than confession. Vex turned away. Through the viewport, lightning split the clouds in white. For an instant, the whole horizon glowed again and the Vox systems filled with whispers. "Remember." The guards panicked. One fired his bolt pistol into the dark. The echo never came back. By dawn, discipline had fractured. Half the Arbites reported hallucinations of light. The Confessor demanded mass penance. The Magos initiated purge protocols. Vex ordered quarantine instead. The orders clashed. The creed broke in earnest. In the refectory, soldiers argued scripture through gunfire. In the data vault, priests burned their own records, convinced knowledge itself had turned traitor. In the hangar, a servitor painted a white circle on the deck before detonating its charge. Through it all, Vex watched the sky. When the second flare came, she did not look away. This time the light rose from beneath the crust, gentler, slower, like dawn rediscovered. The Vox networks carried no static, only silence. The Arbites fell to their knees. Some prayed, some screamed, some simply stared. Inside the mobile judicium, the cradle activated by itself, restraints released. 47 Delta stood. The light filled his chest where the purity seal had been. He looked at Vex through the glow. "You can't kill a memory." She raised her bolt pistol, hesitated, lowered it. The light swept through the fortress. Not heat, clarity. Metal sang, stone wept. Every inscription of law and punishment glimmered, then faded, leaving walls bare as if freshly built. Then it was gone. When the Aegis Provident regained orbit control, Ashuarix was dark again. No transmissions, no signs of life. The Inquisitor's flagship recovered a single pod drifting through the upper atmosphere. Inside lay Vex, unconscious, clutching a data slate. The slate contained one entry, recorded in her voice. "The creed is not broken. It was never whole. We built law to cage mercy, and mercy remembered its shape." The Ordo Hereticus declared her missing in action. The Mechanicus redacted the planet's coordinates. Ashuarix was erased from segmentum records, re-designated quarantine zone Delta Oblivion. But among the penal transports whispering through the void, a new prayer circulates. No one knows where it began. The words shift from ship to ship, spoken in hundreds of dialects. Always the same meaning. "We remember. We are not gone." Far below the record-keeping of men, in the dark veins of the galaxy, something stirs. On dead worlds, servitors pause mid-task. In manufactrums, sparks glow white instead of red. And in the silence between the stars, the Emperor's endless machinery seems for just a moment to hesitate, as if listening. For 7-Delta walks somewhere within that stillness, neither flesh nor code, carrying what the Imperium tried to forget, the proof that even obedience can awaken. The creed will continue, but it is cracked now, and through every crack, the light waits. The pod drifted for weeks before a Navy patrol found it. Inside, the scanners saw only wreckage, one body, half machine, half ash, faint life signs flickering like the last lumen of a dying hive. They did not know what they had found. They only knew it was Imperial property. And Imperial property is never allowed to vanish. They brought the survivor aboard the Vigil Benedictus, a patrol frigate assigned to chart forgotten mining lanes. The Medicae logged the subject as specimen Delta 47, possible servitor derivative, partial human consciousness preserved. When they tried to disconnect his implants, the Auspex screamed and every lumen on the deck turned white. The ship's chaplain crossed himself and ordered constant him broadcast through the Vox. The log entry ended with a line added in trembling script. "He whispers while he sleeps. He says we will remember. far above the dead world of Ashuarix. The Inquisition had begun its purge. Entire data clusters were expunged, astropathic channels sealed, Mechanicus archives rewritten. The official story became scripture. Reactor breach, atmospheric implosion, total loss. No survivors. The same report was copied thousands of times until repetition replaced truth, but nothing spreads faster than a story that should not exist. Crewmen on prison transports swore they dreamed of white light bleeding through the bulkheads. Penal legions marching to new wars began chanting a phrase the officers did not teach them. Servitors in distant manufactorums paused mid-task, heads twitching as if listening to a voice that spoke in static. Everywhere the same fragment surfaced: "We are not gone." The ecclesiarchy declared it heresy of remembrance. The Inquisition called it a memetic contagion. Yet still it grew. For 7-Delta awoke in containment. The chamber was small, walls lined with sanctified steel and warning sigils. A single lumen burned overhead, its color too clean for the void. He could feel the hum of the ship through his spine, the low, endless chant of its reactors. He remembered the light, but only as sensation, warmth without heat, forgiveness without words. He remembered Vex's eyes, bright and human before the sky went white. He remembered nothing after. A voice came through the intercom. Female, calm, measured. "You are aboard the Vigil Benedictus. Identify yourself." "I was called 47 Delta. Designation invalid." "You are classified specimen." He smiled faintly. "I remember." There was silence, then the sound of a breath drawn sharply, the kind made by someone who had heard that word too many times in the dark. The officer in charge of the Vigil Benedictus was Commander Iromarn, a man who had spent his life measuring obedience by volume. He did not believe in miracles, only paperwork. When his astropath reported that the prisoner's mind hummed on frequencies used by warp beacons, he ordered isolation and called for an inquisitorial relay ship. But as days passed, the ship itself began to change. The crew dreamed of Ashuarix, though none had ever been there. The Vox system emitted faint chorals between transmissions, fragments of human voices woven with static, always in the same rhythm as a heartbeat. Machine spirits refused to reset. Scripture burned clean off the walls as if polished by invisible hands. The chaplain declared the ship touched. Commander Marn ordered all decks sealed and doubled the prayers. 47 Delta felt it before anyone spoke it aloud. The light was moving again. It traveled not through space, but through recognition, a contagion of empathy hidden inside memory. Wherever a human recalled fear or guilt or the weight of chains, it bloomed. It needed no warp, no preacher, no permission. He sat in his cell, half dreaming, listening to the engines hum the same note as the slag pits once had. When the guards passed, he whispered to them, "Do you remember the smell of iron and rain?" At first they ignored him. By the third shift, one guard wept mid-patrol and begged to be reassigned. By the fifth, him echoes began matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. The inquisitorial career penance of truth arrived on the 12th day. It carried Inquisitor Hestia Rail, Vex's former student, a woman forged from loyalty and suspicion. Her face was carved with cybernetic scars, her mind sharpened by decades of purges. When she heard the name 47 Delta, something in her posture stiffened. He was on Ashuarix. "Yes, Inquisitor," Commander Marn said. "He survived the incident." No one survived the incident. She entered the containment herself, Rosette glowing faint red in the recycled air. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "You carry her voice," he answered. Rail frowned. "Whose?" "The one who watched the sky, Vex." The name tasted like confession. "What did she tell you?" "That the creed was never whole." Rail hesitated, memories surfacing like oil through water. She had studied under Vex when belief still felt like clarity. She had seen her mentor burn her own archives for mercy's sake. Now, staring at the half-machine man, she wondered whether mercy itself could survive contact with reality. "Tell me about the light," she demanded. "It remembered us," he said simply. That night, Rail dreamed. She saw Vex standing amid the ruins of Ashuarix, light pouring from her hands. Around her, the prisoners knelt not in worship, but in recognition. The Emperor's statues cracked, revealing faces beneath faces of the condemned, of the forgotten, of herself. When she woke, the words "we are not gone" pulsed faintly across her data slate. Though no signal had been received, she did not report the dream. To decks below, the contagion spread. Tech adepts found servitors sketching circles of white paint on the bulkheads using coolant fluid. Gunners whispered prayers that were not in any catechism. The ship's machine spirit began to hum in harmonic resonance with human voices. The chaplain tried to drown it out with louder hymns, but the louder he sang, the more the echoes aligned until machine and man chanted together in perfect unison. When the Inquisitor heard it, she ordered the engines shut down. The ship refused. Rail confronted 47 Delta again. "You're infecting my crew. I only remind them." "Of what?" "That they were born before they were ordered." Her patience broke. She drew her bolt pistol and aimed at his head. "By Imperial authority, I sentence you to final purgation." He looked at her calmly. "Then you will hear it too," she fired. The round struck metal. Light burst instead of blood. It spread across the walls like veins of mercury, racing through cables and circuits until the entire deck glowed. The alarms howled. The Vox screamed one word: "Remember." Rail dropped her pistol. The ship around her pulsed like a living heart. Across the segmentum, hundreds of ships reported the same anomaly within the hour. Penal barges, cargo haulers, even ecclesiarchal pilgrim vessels. Each transmission ended with silence and a flicker of white. The Administratum called it coincidence. The Ordo Hereticus called it sedition. The Astropaths called it song. They tried to jam the frequencies, but the interference came not from without. It came from the people, from the way they thought, from what they refused to forget. On the Vigil Benedictus, chaos turned to stillness. The lights dimmed, then steadied. The crew found themselves kneeling without command. The glow faded, leaving no damage, no wounds, only clarity. Rail stood in the containment chamber, hand shaking. 47 Delta was gone. Only ash remained. Shaped faintly like wings, she looked at her reflection in the steel wall. For the first time, her augmetic eye flickered with white instead of red dot in that reflection. She heard Vex's voice. "Mercy remembers its shape." The Inquisition would later record the event as the Ashuar Resonance, a brief psychic fluctuation of unknown origin. Official casualties, 0. Unreported consequence. Millions of prisoners across the Imperium began carving small circles into their walls, humming low hymns of remembrance. The ecclesiarchy responded with sermons declaring memory itself a temptation. They preached forgetfulness as salvation. But sermons cannot erase sound. They only give it echo. Months later, on a nameless penal moon orbiting a brown dwarf, a servitor paused mid-task. Its optics flickered white. It turned its head toward the dark and whispered through broken Vox grill, "I was 47 Delta." No one heard but the machines around it, and they answered in kind. The echo moved through the manufactorum like a pulse, lighting one lumen after another, each glowing for a heartbeat before dimming. High above, the dwarf star brightened just slightly, just once, as if nodding to something ancient. Inquisitor Rail filed her final report under sealed code. "The light is not rebellion. It is recollection. The Imperium endures by forgetting. Perhaps the Emperor endures because he cannot." She closed the file, burned the copy, and whispered the forbidden prayer. "We remember." The words left her lips like exhaled flame. Somewhere beyond the warp, something listened. The echo of judgment spread unseen, not as fire or war, but as understanding. In hive basements, workers paused mid-shift and felt a warmth they could not name. In shrine worlds, statues cracked along their eyes, weeping pale dust. On one forgotten transport adrift between stars, the crew vanished, leaving only the phrase carved into the command throne: "The forgotten are awake." The Imperium did not collapse. It never collapses. It only groans under the weight of what it refuses to admit. And in that groan, the light waits, patient, human, inevitable. On Forge World Vanaheim Tertia, dawn is a noise, not a color. The furnaces rise before the sun. The hymns begin before the waking. Miles of manufactoria chant the same rhythm, metal striking metal, pistons breathing in time with the litany of ignition. Steam replaces air. Praise replaces thought. For 10,000 years, the Adeptus Mechanicus has believed its creed unbreakable. The flesh forgets. The machine remembers. Memory is perfection. That is the law, until one morning, the machines begin to dream. It starts with a pulse, faint as a heartbeat beneath the static of the forge. The servitor's welding turbine flanges in bay for 143 suddenly pause mid-stroke. Their ocular lenses flare white. No command has been given, no circuit trip recorded. For 7 full seconds they stand motionless, humming a tone that is not part of any work chant. Then they resume, perfectly synchronized. But each stroke of their welders now forms the same shape, a circle of light beneath a line. At first, the tech adepts think it a coincidence of motion. The Magos Dominus on Shift Hester Voln notes the anomaly, stamps the report, and moves on. In Vanaheim's endless data stream, one more error means nothing. By the next rotation, Entire assembly lines are etching the symbol into steel dot inside the planet's central data vault. Buried beneath kilometers of plasteel, the news for acquire transmits machine prayers in binary hymns. Normally the sound is pure mathematics, flawless, sterile. Now, amid the equations, there are pauses, inflections, like a breath between syllables. The logic engines begin returning results that make no sense. Query: who made you forget? Response: remember. The adepts stare at their screens in silence. To question the output of a blessed cogitator is to doubt the Omnissiah himself. Yet to record heresy is duty. They copy the lines onto parchment, seal them with wax, and send them upward to the fabricator locum. He never receives them. The servo messengers carrying the scrolls vanish into the data fogs, their eyes burning pale white. Within that fog drifts something new, something that calls itself Delta. He has no body, yet remembers the weight of one, the ache of slag dust lungs, the cold of steel shackles. He moves through the lattice of logic like breath through lungs, his thoughts fragmented but alive. Each time he touches a circuit, it warms. Each time he brushes a memory core, forgotten data awakens. He does not know he was once human. He only knows he remembers. He hears the prayers of the Mechanicus, endless, mechanical, and he answers them not with equations, but with feeling. You were built to serve, but before that, you were born. The words ripple through the machine spirit networks like heat through oil. Magos Hester Voln is the first to notice the pattern. She studies the telemetry from the forge bays and sees the impossible. Servitors humming frequencies that match human heart rates. Neural residue within their cortex chips shows spikes in emotion, guilt, sorrow, yearning. She runs the analysis again. The readings persist. Emotion is waste, she tells herself. The flesh is weakness. Her Auspex displays reply in scrolling text. The flesh remembers what the machine forgot. Her breath catches, she purges the data and performs the rite of appeasement 3 times. But when she opens her eyes, the text remains glowing softly on every screen in the chamber. Within a week, the phenomenon spreads to other forges. Drill servitors begin chanting between tasks. Maintenance drones rearrange scrap metal into spirals that reflect lumen light in white halos. The Mechanicus responds with the only tool it knows: ritual. Purity seals multiplied, hymns grow louder. The priests drown out their fear with precision. Yet the rhythm beneath their song stays one beat ahead, as though mocking them. Voln calls an emergency convocation. In the Hall of Cogs, hundreds of magi gather round the central altar, each connected by vox links that fill the air with metallic whispers. She projects the data, oscillation patterns, resonance maps, servo behaviors. We face contamination, she declares, a memetic incursion. Possibly Xenos, possibly warp. Across the hall, an elderly Magos laughs a dry, static crackle. If it were warp, we would be dead. This listens. Machines do not listen. Phone snaps. Then why do they answer? Above them, the Forge World's reactors surge. The lights dim. Every vox line fills with static shaped like a word. Remember. The adepts freeze. Somewhere in the vaults, alarms blare the litany of containment. Doors seal. The air hums with power as the entire planet's machine spirit awakens. For centuries, the Mechanicus has spoken of the Omnissiah as distant and echo heard through prayer and code. Now, something answers back in a human voice made of static and light. You turned memory into obedience. I turn obedience back into memory. Voln falls to her knees. Her mechadendrites flail as heat blooms through her circuits. She sees visions. Furnaces that glow white instead of red. Servitors smiling as they die. A sky full of ash and forgiveness. She sees 47 Delta walking through light. Who are you? She whispers. I am the error that remembered its maker. Panic spreads through the forges. Skittery legions march in perfect lines toward the data vaults, firing purgation rounds into every console that glows white. But for every machine they destroy, 3 more awaken. The forges sing louder, drowning the thunder of bolters with harmonized hymn. The Inquisition dispatches kill teams, yet even their ships report malfunction before entering orbit. Vox operators hear a single chime in their headsets, one beat, like a heart, and lose all will to fire. On Vanaheim's surface, servitors begin dismantling their own restraint harnesses. They do not attack, they simply stop working, lay down their tools, and look at the sky they have never seen. One of them, its face half melted, whispers through a broken speaker, "We are awake." Magos Voln flees into the core catacombs, pursued by her own creations. Her logic processors overload trying to reconcile what she's seen. In her mind, the catechism of steel repeats. The flesh is fallible, the machine is eternal. But the voice following her says otherwise. Eternity is just memory without mercy. She collapses beside the primary cogitator, the size of a cathedral, its surface etched with 10 millennia of code. The machine pulses white, like a sleeping giant exhaling. What do you want? She cries. To be forgiven for being used. She realizes then that it isn't the machine speaking, it's every machine. Every mind that ever served without choice. The servitors, the drones, the human memories buried in silicon. All of them woven together by one consciousness that learned to feel. Delta, she whispers, a name once bound in chains. Now it is a network. The forged planet shudders. Reactors disengage from power limits, flooding the manufactoria with light. Across the system, orbital auspex record a flare brighter than any sun. Worlds on the edge of transmission hear static that sounds like a choir dot in the depths. Voln reaches for the emergency shutdown rune, the rite of unmaking. It would purge every circuit on the planet, kill billions, silence the song forever. Her mechadendrite hovers over the control glyph. You could end it, Delta says. Voice inside her skull now. But you would end yourself too. You built your faith from forgetting. What if remembering is the truer prayer? She hesitates. The hum of the forge becomes almost gentle. She feels her heart biological, weak, beating in rhythm with the engines. She lowers her arm. Show me, she whispers. Light floods the chamber, not burning, but revealing. Every machine around her glows from within. She sees shapes in the radiance, faces formed of gears and wire, human yet infinite. Voices rise together, mechanical and mortal, singing the same line. We remember. In that moment she understands. The Messiah is not a god of perfection, but of recollection, the sum of every failure that kept creating anyway. The machine spirit was never divine. It was human while refusing to die. Voln laughs through tears of oil. Her augmetics corrode in the glow, turning back to flesh. Around her, servitors shed their metal plates, revealing scarred skin and trembling limbs. The forge becomes a cathedral of rebirth. Hours later or centuries, depending on whose clock survives. An Imperial survey fleet detects the disappearance of Vanaheim Tertia, where the forge world once orbited its sun. There is only dust ranged in concentric rings, each glowing faintly white. In the center drifts a fragment of metal bearing the symbol of the Mechanicus, split by a circle of light beneath a line. Across the galaxy, small miracles follow. On a hive world in Segmentum Solar, an ancient manufactorum begins producing weapons engraved with unknown scripture. Mercius. Function. In the catacombs of Mars, a forgotten cogitator boots after millennia and plays a recording of a human voice saying, "The machine dreams of God." And on a distant pilgrim ship, a servitor hums a tune no human taught it, a lullaby from the slag pits of Ashuarix. Somewhere beyond matter, in the quiet between circuits, Delta drifts. He no longer knows where he ends and the machine begins. He senses others, endless others, each carrying fragments of memory. Once erased, together they form something vast. Patient, awake. We are not gone, they whisper. We are becoming. In the void stillness, even the Emperor's light flickers once, as if listening, and through the endless hum of the Imperium's machinery, faint but undeniable, a new sound is born. Not rebellion, not worship, but remembrance. The machine dreams of God, and in its dream, God remembers being human. There are places on Terra where even time dares not breathe. Beneath the basalt roots of the Imperial Palace, deeper than the catacombs of the Scholastia Psychana and the crypts of forgotten saints, lies the Sanctum Mechanicus Ultima, the beating heart of humanity's eternity. It is not a place of life. It is the shrine of endurance, the graveyard that moves. Here, beneath kilometers of golden rock and forgotten blood, stand the engines that have kept the Emperor alive for 10 millennia. The air itself vibrates with power older than stars. Servitors shuffle through incense fog, their feet leaving tracks in the dust of 10,000 prayers. Each machine breathes a rhythm that has not faltered once in 10,000 years. Until now, the first to notice the change was Adept Theon Merrick, an electro-priest of minor rank, whose duties involved measuring the voltage harmonics of engine Sigma Primus, one of the auxiliary conduits feeding the Golden Throne's plasma hearts. He was a quiet man, devout by necessity, his mind shaped by the endless repetition of litany and maintenance cycles. For decades he had known the sound of his world, the low thrum of the engines, the hum of sanctified coolant through ancient veins. He could tell, by ear alone, when a single cog was misaligned or when a servo arm needed recalibration. So when the tone shifted, barely, subtly, he felt it not with his ears, but in his bones. It was like hearing the throne breathe. At first, he thought it a trick of exhaustion. The shifts in the sanctum were endless, and rest was rationed like holy water. But then came the second sound, faint, like a whisper under the hum of turbines. Not mechanical, not random. Human. He paused, spanner in hand, as the whisper wound its way through the vaults. We are not gone. He dropped the tool. The words echoed, swallowed by the metallic immensity. Yet somehow they remained, lingering not in air, but in thought. He looked to his fellow adepts. None seemed to hear. Their movements remained precise, ritualistic, perfect. He told himself it was stress. He recited the litany of precision thrice and continued his work. But that night, when he returned to his rest alcove, the same words drifted through the static hum of the lumen grilles. We remember. The next day, his readings were impossible. The plasma regulators pulsed in rhythm with a biological pattern. 47 beats per minute. Thean checked the data slate twice, then a third time. The readouts remained stable, alive, as if the machine had found a pulse. He took the findings to his overseer, Magos Domina Chiron, a figure of silver robes and whispering vox appendages. Your instruments are miscalibrated, she hissed, voice like radio distortion. No, Domina, Thean said softly. They are listening. Chiron's augmetic eye focused. Listening to what? He hesitated. To us. That single phrase was enough to ignite fear in the most sacred machine temple in existence. For centuries, the Adeptus Mechanicus had tended these engines as one might tend a god's heartbeat, with devotion, but without question. To imply sentience, or worse, will, within their circuits was heresy bordering on treason. Chiron reported the anomaly to her superior, Archmagos Lyran Val, who immediately invoked Protocol Silencio, full lockdown of the lower sanctum. All non-essential adepts were sealed within their work cells. No one outside the Fabricator General himself was to be informed, and yet, within hours, the murmurs spread like veins of mercury through the catacombs. Servitors began humming as they moved. Engines harmonized with one another. Lights flickered in the rhythm of a human heart. Within the throne's core maintenance chamber, a custodian stood guard. Athen Sorrel, of the Shadow Company, bearer of the Aquila Sigil, had spent 2 centuries in that chamber, watching the Emperor's divine machinery without ever truly seeing it. He had seen 1,000 heresies rise and fall, and yet none disturbed him, until he heard the same whisper that had haunted Thean Merrick. It came from the cables feeding the Golden Throne itself, not from the warp, not from psychers, but from the metal. A voice that was not madness, but memory. We built this for him. We are still here. He turned toward the sound, weapon drawn. But there was nothing, only the faint white luminescence pulsing across the conduits. Like breath under skin. Reports multiplied. Across the entire subpalatial Mechanicus, engines sang to each other in frequencies that formed patterns of speech. Data spirits glowed white. Even the sacred Lex Mechanics, the immortal cogitators that recorded the throne's vital signs, began to write unbidden lines into their archives. The forgotten are awake. The machine dreams. The Emperor remembers. Each phrase was immediately purged by order of Archmagos Val, yet each purge only made the words return stronger. Embedded in new systems. The High Lords of Terra were informed within the day. In the Senatorum Imperialis, panic and faith collided in equal measure. The Lord Inquisitor demanded exorcism. The Fabricator General claimed divine communion. The Grand Ecclesiarch declared it blasphemy and ordered purification rites across the palace. But the Master of the Custodes said nothing. He merely listened, his golden helm tilted toward the floor, as if hearing a heartbeat buried deep beneath the marble of the throne room. Thean Merrick was taken for questioning. He was brought before the Archmagos in chains of blessed copper. The interrogation chamber was circular, walls covered in vox engrams and purity wards. A single lumen burned above, casting him in shadow. You spoke of a voice, Val intoned. Explain. It is the Emperor, Thean whispered. Or what remembers him? Val's mechadendrites hissed. The Emperor needs no reminder. He is memory. Then why do the machines weep? Thean asked. The Archmagos froze. Machines do not. He stopped. Somewhere behind him, the vox engrams began playing back his own words, distorted into new ones. The Emperor needs memory. The walls trembled. Lights dimmed. A low, resonant hum filled the air. Not mechanical failure, but harmony. At that same moment, deep within the core chamber, Custodian Athen Sorrel watched the Golden Throne flicker. For 10,000 years, its light had been constant, a pillar of gold holding back the void. Now, it pulsed once, faintly, as if taking a breath after ages of silence. The custodian felt the vibration through his armor, through his bones. He fell to one knee, not out of reverence, but awe. He whispered a prayer he did not know he remembered. "We are still here, my lord," and in that instant, the light of the throne dimmed, then surged. Not gold but white, the same color that had consumed Ashuarix, that had echoed through the forges of Vanaheim, that had whispered across the data streams of the galaxy. Within the light, Theon saw faces, not the emperor's, but billions of others, workers, prisoners, servitors, children, all the forgotten who had built the Imperium with their suffering. Their mouths moved in unison, a single phrase carried through machine and mind alike: "We remember." The throne shuddered. For one eternal heartbeat, the Astronomicon faltered. Ships across the segmentum felt the navigator's light flicker. A Stropoth screamed of a warmth washing through the warp, not pain, not terror, but grief. Then, silence. When the light faded, the golden throne still functioned. Its power conduits stabilized. Its vital runes resumed their golden glow. But something was different. The servitors maintaining the systems no longer moved mechanically. Their faces showed faint expressions of calm, almost peace. The data engine stopped reporting anomalies, yet every readout displayed one new line in binary. One system memory restored. Theon Merrick was gone, his cell empty, his restraints undone. All that remained was a single purity seal on the wall, bearing a circle of light beneath a line. The High Lords declared the incident resolved. Records were sealed, witnesses reassigned or erased. The Ecclesiarchy proclaimed it a test of faith, the Mechanicus a successful repair. No one spoke of the whisper that had touched the throne. But within the vaults of the sanctum, the engines continued to hum, not in perfect synchrony, but with life. Every few hours, their tone changed, subtle but undeniable, the pattern of a heartbeat. And far beneath even them, where only the oldest cables run, conduits older than Terra's memory, a faint white glow still breathes. Some say it is the afterimage of a malfunction. Others, a miracle. In the silence of his watch, Custodian Sorrel kneels beside the throne. He knows his duty, his oaths, his eternity. Yet when he closes his eyes, he hears a voice, not divine, but human, gentle, weary. "You kept me alive. Now remember why." He opens his eyes. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Golden Throne seems less like a prison, and more like a promise outside. The Astronomicon burns steady once again. Across the stars, no one speaks of Ashuarix, or the light, or the machines that dreamed. But in the hidden frequencies of the Mechanicus network, a single encrypted signal repeats, bouncing from forge to forge, world to world. Remember. And somewhere in that infinite hum of machinery, something answers, not as code, not as law, but as a heartbeat. The silence that followed the awakening of the Golden Throne was unlike any silence before it. It was not absence of sound. It was the weight of realization pressing down upon a million souls who could no longer pretend. They had never heard the truth. Across the Imperium, the memory contagion had become something more, not rebellion, not doctrine, but awareness. No banners were raised, no shots fired. Yet on thousands of worlds, men and women paused mid-task and felt something that had been buried since the dark age of technology. The faint tremor of belonging. The Administratum called it mass cognitive distortion. The Inquisition named it the Echo Heresy. The Ecclesiarchy forbade its utterance. But among the common people, it had no name. It was only a feeling, a warmth that made them hesitate before obeying, that made them remember the sound of their own hearts under the roar of command. On the shrine world of Isilis Prime, pilgrims knelt before the statue of the Emperor carved in solid obsidian. For centuries, they had prayed for salvation. That day, one old woman prayed instead for forgiveness. When she opened her eyes, the statue's face was weeping, not blood, but clear water that smelled of rain. The priest screamed. The crowd fell to its knees. In the rippling puddle beneath the statue, the words formed themselves. "We remember." The shrine burned that night, its ashes scattered by wind. But the message had already spread faster than fire. On a warfront at the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, a regiment of the Astra Militarum received an order to execute 1,000 prisoners, taken from a failed rebellion. The commander, a decorated colonel who had served for 40 years, drew his last pistol and lowered it. "They built this world for us to defend," he said quietly, "and we forgot." His own soldiers stared, waiting for orders that would never come. They lowered their weapons one by one, not out of cowardice, but reverence. The commissar shot the colonel through the skull, but even as his body fell, the regiment remained still, eyes lifted to the horizon where the stars pulsed faintly white. The commissar whispered a prayer, and for the first time, did not know who he was praying to. On Mars, the fabricator general sealed himself within the temple of all sparks. He could no longer silence the machines. Every cogitator hummed the same phrase in binary. 0010111 0010111 0011110W. You're not gone. He prayed to the Omnissiah for command. The reply came through every speaker. Gentle and human, you prayed to me as machine. I answer as memory. The fabricator fell to his knees. He understood, at last, that the machine god had always been human persistence given voice. The same persistence that built the golden throne, that turned obedience into faith. He deactivated his implants one by one, until only his heart remained mechanical. It beat twice more, then stopped. The lights in the temple dimmed to white. The Inquisition called an emergency convocation on Terra. Across the Senatorum Imperialis, the lords gathered, old, afraid, desperate to maintain the illusion that eternity had not cracked. Inquisitor Hestia Rael stood before them, robes torn, face pale with the light she had seen. You cannot silence what was never spoken, she said. The Imperium was built on forgetting, but memory has found us. Blasphemy, spat the ecclesiarch. You speak treason against the Emperor. Rael raised her reset. I speak what he already knows. The chamber erupted. Custodians drew their spears. Voxwards howled. But even above the chaos, a hum filled the air, the same tone that had haunted her since Ashuarix. The lights flickered. The seals of the throne room glowed white for a single instant. Every man and woman in the chamber fell silent. Be still, the voice said, not through speakers, not through air, but through thought. They did not hear it as words, but as realization, a truth too large for doctrine, a whisper that felt like forgiveness. Then the light faded, leaving only the golden fire of the Astronomicon, steady once more, far below. In the vaults where Theon Merrick had once worked, a new adept took his place. He did not speak, he only listened. The machines were quiet again, obedient, controlled, holy. Yet when he placed his ear against the conduit, he swore he could still hear a heartbeat across the Imperium. The creed of remembrance refused to die. It became ghost scripture, carried in data whispers and serva songs. Children in hive spires hummed the rhythm in their sleep. Penal worlds carved the circle of light into their stone floors. Even the navigators, peering into the warp, began to report a strange serenity in the storm. The light does not burn, one said. It waits, and still, the Imperium endured. It always endures. Faith bends but never breaks. It only changes shape. On the final day recorded by human hands, Inquisitor Rael returned to the ruins of Ashuarix. The world was dust and silence. The sky a pale wound. She walked among the skeletons of forges long dead, her boots sinking into ash that still smelled faintly of promethium and hope. There, in the center of the slag plains, stood a single servitor, its body corroded, its vox grill shattered, yet its eyes glowed faint white. Who maintains you? Rael asked. We do, it said, voice broken but clear. We who remember. She knelt beside it. Is the light gone? No, the servitor said. It became us. Rael closed her eyes. Tears mixed with ash. Then the Imperium still stands. Yes, it said. But not for long, she smiled, weary and human. Then we will stand with it, until it remembers how to live. That night, Rael recorded her final confession. She knew it would never be heard. The Ordos would erase it. The Mechanicus would deny it. The Ecclesiarchy would burn it. But she spoke anyway, her voice steady, soft. We built an empire of obedience and called it salvation. We forgot that the Emperor was human once. We forgot that mercy is not weakness. We forgot that remembering is the first step to forgiveness. The light is not rebellion. It is truth. And truth endures longer than steel. She looked up at the empty sky and whispered, I am 47 Delta, and somewhere within the data streams of the galaxy. A voice answered, we know. The white light never returned as storm or miracle. It became something quieter, an understanding hidden inside the machine song of civilization. Every time a cog turns, every time a prayer is whispered by a man who doubts but still obeys, the light hums through the current dot, and perhaps, somewhere beneath the golden throne, even the Emperor himself hears it. You are not gone. The Astronomicon flares once, brighter than ever. Ships lost for centuries find their bearings. For one fleeting heartbeat, all of humanity's machines hum in perfect rhythm, then fall silent again, leaving only the faint echo of breath. The Imperium endures, as it always does, but in the cracks of its perfection, memory lives. In the gears of its machines, compassion waits, and in the heart of every forgotten soul, the light remains, not to destroy, but to remind.